You are listening to One Nation Under Crime, a historical, chronological true crime podcast. Each week, we go through our nation's history and discuss one case from each year, starting in 1800. I'm Kayla.
And I'm Leah.
And y'all might notice in the title of this week's episode, you might notice that it says Première Partie.
Yes, she said that, not me. Watch your mouth.
Which means part one in French.
There you go. Hablo español.
Because we are discussing Madame Marie Delphine LaLaurie. And we are in New Orleans. And I'm sorry, guys. I can only apologize. That's all I'll say. So we got to get into it because we have a lot to go.
Is this kind of like
So-
you being in Salem, friend?
It's so much worse. But I will say, so for this week's episode, there is a reason why it says part one and it says New Orleans, because there is truly so much about New Orleans as far as history to dig into that that also ties into the case that I couldn't cut out certain parts. There's just too much about it.
Do you know I've never been to New Orleans?
It's amazing.
I've always wanted to
get
go.
into it. But so yes, there are two parts to this case. However, while we are discussing Madame LaLaurie, we will not dig into her case this week. Because we are in New Orleans and there are at least 3 true crime things that have happened through the history of New Orleans that we will eventually get to. I will go into them much more in depth later on. But I'm talking like we're like 150 episodes out from the first one. So what I'm doing is we're going to kind of go through... I'm going to go through the different parts in the history of New Orleans, and then we're going to kind of dig into snippets of some stories of things that have happened, because it's kind of, they tie back to certain things where I can't mention this without mentioning this.
Gotcha.
And so we'll get through it. But guys, I promise there is still true crime this week, and there's 3 different things to discuss.
Okay.
I will really try hard to not get emotional over the third one.
Oh, dear.
It's frustrating. I got upset as I was writing it. And you'll understand why. But next week we will completely discuss Madame LaLaurie to the full extent. And we are going to talk all about New Orleans this week. And we're including the crime stuff, everything. So, and they are cases, guys. So it's not just me, like, it's not like rattling off crime statistics. Like, you're going to hear some stories that you may or may not know. So stick with us for that. I promise it's going to be a really good one. So our sources for this week, allthat'sinteresting.com, where I hear everything there is interesting.
Uh-huh.
Murderpedia. Hi, Brad. And you know, this was a surprise for Brad
Ooh, surprise.
as he was checking out my search history this week.
Oh, I bet he was happy.
I bet he was. And the other source is Ghost City Tours.
Ooh.
You know, maybe he got some culture when he was doing it. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Found a place to take a date.
Maybe so. Maybe not some of these places, but we'll see. Anyways, our events in 1834, January 29th, President Andrew Jackson ordered the first use of U.S. troops to suppress a labor dispute.
Oh.
February 3rd, Wake Forest University was established in North Carolina. February 18th, the first U.S. labor newspaper, The Man, was published in New York City. You know, because men don't have enough. Anyway, March 11th, the United States Survey of the Coast was officially transferred to the Department of the Navy.
Oh.
March 18th, the first railroad tunnel in the U.S. was completed in Pennsylvania. I don't think I would want to go through the first railroad tunnel.
You know?
It doesn't sound good.
No.
there might be some engineering issues with that. Anyway, April 14th, the Whig Party was officially named by U.S. Senator Henry Clay. June 14th, Isaac Fisher Jr. patented sandpaper in Springfield, Vermont. Interesting.
How
thing there.
funny. That's something that it's so common. You
I
don't think
know.
about somebody patenting that.
I know. I saw it and I was like, sandpaper. Okay. June 21st, Cyrus McCormick patented the reaping machine, which was for grain. June 30th, Congress created the Indian Territory, which is now known as Oklahoma.
Huh.
July 7th,
the wind comes rushing through the
yes,
plains?
it does. Yes, it does. July 7th, the anti-abolitionist riots occurred in New York City. August 11th, the Ursuline convent riots occurred when a convent of Roman Catholic Ursuline nuns was burned down by a Protestant mob.
Oh, my heavens.
The event was triggered by reported abuse of a member of the order and was fueled by the rebirth of extreme anti-Catholic sentiment in antebellum New England.
Oh, my goodness.
We almost covered it for this week, but we have Madame LaLaurie. So that's where I went with that one.
That's horrible.
I know. October 14th, Henry Blair was granted a U.S. patent for a corn planter. He is the first Black man to obtain a patent from the U.S.
Cool.
Also on October 14th, in Philadelphia, the Whigs and Democrats staged a gun, stone, and brick battle for control of township elections.
Is that like paper, rock, scissors? Or rock,
Pretty
paper,
much.
scissors?
You just, choose your weapon.
Oh, okay.
It resulted in one death, several injuries, and multiple city blocks burned down.
Oh.
Because, why not? November 1st, the first published reference to a poker game was made as a Mississippi riverboat game. November 11th, the rare 1804 dollar was struck by the United States Mint. They were first created for the use in special proof coin sets used as diplomatic gifts during Edmund Roberts' trips to Siam and Muscat. Only 15 are known to exist today.
Ooh.
And December 3rd, this is something everyone can be thankful for.
Okay.
The first dental society in the United States was organized in New York.
Very glad for dental care.
Yes.
Very glad.
Our undated events in 1834, the Medical College of Louisiana was founded in New Orleans, which later became Tulane University. We know that place. Wake Forest College was founded in Wake Forest, but it later became Wake Forest University, for anyone wondering. The Wilmington and Raleigh Railroad was chartered in Wilmington, North Carolina, and it began construction. Our births in 1834, March 15th, John K. Buckland. He's a Medal of Honor recipient for his actions during the Battle of Chancellorsville in Virginia during the Civil War. He's a Pisces. And March 24th, John Wesley Powell. He was an American geologist. He is famous for his 1869 geographic expedition, a 3-month river trip down the Green and Colorado rivers, including the first official U.S. government-sponsored passage through the Grand Canyon.
Ooh.
He's an Aries. And this will just, April 1st. James Fisk.
Are you fooling?
Nope. You'll see why that makes sense. James Fisk Jr., a.k.a. Big Jim Fisk. He was an American stockbroker and corporate executive known for scheming President Ulysses S. Grant.
Ruh-roh.
He is the topic of a future episode. He is murdered. He's an Aries. April 26th, Charles Farrar Brown went under the nom de plume Artemus Ward, which I mean is a pretty good name to go by, honestly. Yeah. Artemis, I mean. He is considered America's first stand-up comedian. He's a Taurus. And November 21st, Hetty Green was born. She was an American businesswoman and financier known as the richest woman in America and named by the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest miser. Her nickname was the Witch of Wall Street.
Oh, no.
She was a Scorpio. And for anybody who doesn't know, a miser, like if you think of a miser, just think of Scrooge.
Ebenezer Scrooge. Easy for me to say.
Yeah, just think of Scrooge. Like she was the richest woman in America, but she was not given that money out. Our deaths in 1834, October 16th, Lorenzo Dow. He was an eccentric American evangelist. Yep, got it there. Yeah, eccentric American it's because I'm saying eccentric American. Anyways, he was an eccentric American evangelist.
There you go.
His autobiography at one time was the second best-selling book in the United States, exceeded only by the Bible.
Huh.
Which I'm sure all the hotels were snapping up at that point, so...
When we were in Disney,
I know
there was a Bible. In the nightstand.
July 26th, Jonathan Jennings died. He was the first governor of Indiana. April 10th, we are now getting into our actual topic. April 10th of 1834, a fire at the LaLaurie mansion in New Orleans, Louisiana, uncovered the dark secret held onto by Madame Marie Delphine LaLaurie, an attic full of torment and torture that still haunts the ground it sits on today.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's known as the Big Easy, Crescent City, the birthplace of jazz, Crawfish Town, the city that care forgot, the Paris of the South, the Hollywood South, and simply Nolans. No matter what you call it, it's the city where people call you Sha. And if no one knows what Sha is, if you ever go to New Orleans and anyone calls you Sha, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a term of endearment. It's kind of like if you replace babe or you replace like honey or something. So if somebody calls you Sha, it's okay.
Okay.
It's not a bad thing. It's a city where people call you Sha. No one's ever going to pass a good time. Lagniappe means getting a little something extra. The cemeteries are above ground. Jazz funerals are the norm. The voodoo queen Marie Laveau is said to still roam the streets. Gris-gris is something people take very seriously, which that's something that you wear to ward off bad spirits. Boudin and Crawfish come by the pound. Beignets are served with a little extra powdered sugar. The only acceptable drinks before 10 a.m. are a cafe au lait, mimosas, or a Bloody Mary. And Bourbon Street is the place most people go to have a night they will never remember. As you can tell, I have a bit of a soft spot for New Orleans. After all, my last name is Guillot. It's not my maiden name, but I love New Orleans, always have. It's been one of my favorite places that I've ever been. And we'll get into it. There's something about New Orleans that just has a way of like making you feel like at home. Like, you know how you've been places and you're like, this feels like I feel like I should be here. Like it feels
like Disney
good.
For me.
Yes.
Like when I was there. Yeah.
It could be the food, could be the music, partially the architecture, certainly the ghosts, also likely the amazing cemeteries, maybe the touch of witchy vibes, or perhaps it's the unshakable feeling that the city has so many secrets and that she knows all of yours as well. New Orleans is a consolidated city parish located on the Mississippi River in the southeastern regions of the U.S. in Louisiana. Louisiana famously uses the terms parish instead of a county. So if you're ever thinking of why is that called a parish, let's get into it. Historically, a county is the land ruled by a count or a countess, but a parish is in the Anglican, Eastern Orthodox, and Catholic Church government entity. So that's why Louisiana was officially under Roman Catholic rule under both France and Spain's rule, and therefore the territories generally coincide with church parishes because it was heavily Catholic. So that's why everything is marked off into parishes. So Louisiana is the only state in the country that uses the term parish. The only other state to use a different term is Alaska, and they use the term borough, which means a fortified town instead of county.
I didn't know that.
We had a boss. I don't know if Leah knows this story, but we've not talked a whole lot about our job, but it spans the United States.
Yes.
We'll say that.
Yes, it does.
We have a boss, and he had to go to Louisiana to do a sign up for people. And it was one of the first ones that he ever did in Louisiana. And, you fill out all your information, everything like that. And you get to the part where it says county, right? He's sitting there and he overhears a man on the phone in the other room saying, they got this boy down here from Alabama. And let me tell you, he doesn't even know what country he's in. Because he read country instead of county. Because they call it a parish. So, yes, the best.
I haven't heard that story.
One of my favorite stories of all time, and told by one of the best storytellers on the face of the planet.
Yes.
The city was founded in 1718 by French colonists and served as the capital of French Louisiana before it became a part of the United States officially in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. And I just put in parentheses, remember back when Aaron Burr tried to be a sneaky snake? By 1840, New Orleans was the third most populated city in the United States and the largest in the South from the antebellum era until after World War II. After growing by 45% in the 1850s, by 1860, the city itself had nearly 170,000 people. It had grown in wealth with a, quote, per capita income that was second in the nation.
Wow.
And the most in the South. The city had a role as a primary commercial gateway for the nation's booming midsection, so the Midwest. The port was the nation's third largest in terms of tonnage of imported goods after Boston and New York, handling 659,000 tons of imported goods in 1859 alone.
Goodness. Well, that makes sense, though.
Violence throughout the South, especially the Memphis riots of 1866, followed by the New Orleans riots in the same year, led Congress to pass the Reconstruction Act and the 14th Amendment, extending the protections of full citizenship to freed men and free people. However, Democrats passed Jim Crow laws establishing racial segregation in public facilities. In 1889, the legislature passed a constitutional amendment incorporating a grandfather clause. People are garbage. That effectively disenfranchised freedmen. The southern U.S. was ruled by the Democratic Party at this point, and public schools were racially segregated and remained so up until 1960. Not that long ago, which is very weird to think of. Enter Homer Plessy.
Can I tell you something real quick about that?
Sure.
My brother played baseball with some guys, and one of them was was black. And we, we were really good friends, and good friends with the dad and everything. And I asked my dad, hey, did you go to school with him, with the dad? And my dad looked at me and said, no, baby. And I said, oh, you didn't know? I thought that, that he grew up around here. And he looked at me and said, Leah, baby, I never went to school with anybody that was
so
black.
crazy to think about, too.
And until he said that, it never entered my mind that he wouldn't have.
It's so crazy.
It blew my mind.
It's so insane.
I'm just one generation away from that.
Mm-hmm.
How crazy. And when I taught, when I would teach about that, the looks on the kids' faces when I would tell them that, they wouldn't let people go to the same school just because of what color they were.
Drink out of the same water fountain as someone else.
Or go into the same
bathroom.
Go into the same bathroom or even go into the same entrance for a movie theater. The looks on their faces. And, just the pure innocence and the looks on their faces of why? That doesn't make any sense. And I would say, you're exactly right. That doesn't make any sense. You're exactly right. But it just when, the realization that I was just one generation removed from that, it still just amazes me.
It's so crazy.
Just really?
Yeah.
So anyway, continue. It was just that realization of, oh my gosh. Can't believe it. So enter Homer.
Homer Plessy is extremely important. If you've never heard his name, now is a good time for you to learn about him. We've all heard of Rosa Parks.
Yes.
Well, now you'll know about Homer Plessy.
Okay.
Plessy boarded a commuter train departing New Orleans for Covington, Louisiana, and he sat in the car reserved for whites only, and he was arrested. The case
I'm assuming he was not white.
Correct. Yes. The case resulting from this incident, Plessy versus Ferguson, was heard by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1896. The court ruled that separate but equal accommodations were constitutional, effectively upholding Jim Crow measures. Anyways. Nativist prejudices surfaced even more during this time. The anti-Italian sentiment in 1891 contributed to the lynchings of 11 Italians. Some were shot and killed in the jail where they were detained. The others were hanged. It is the largest mass lynching in U.S. history, which is just...
I do not understand.
I don't. There are several infamous true crime events that have occurred in the city, and we will likely discuss them in detail at a later time. I can tell you we do because I have it planned out that far because I'm a crazy person.
Straight from her lips, guys.
At least I'm self-aware.
There you go.
I can't talk about the city without including them. One that most people know is the Axeman of New Orleans. His reign of terror lasted from May of 1918 to October of 1919. To this day, the Axeman has never been identified and the murders are still unsolved. He mainly targeted Italian immigrants and Italian Americans who were all coincidentally somehow related to owning a grocery store or butcher shop. However, that was kind of like a known
Italian
job at that time, or like for people to come here and open who were Italian or Italian Americans to open a grocery store or a butcher shop. But anyways, many media outlets sensationalized this aspect of the crimes in particular, even suggesting mafia involvement despite the lack of evidence. The victims were typically attacked with an axe, which often belonged to the victims themselves. A panel on the back door of a home was typically removed by a chisel, which, along with the panel, was left on the floor near the door. So not only was the axe not his, he got it from the house. He brought a chisel with him, but left it. Like, here you go. It's fine. Whatever. No, fingerprinting wasn't a thing back then. The axemen then attacked one or more of the residents with either an axe or, sorry guys, a straight razor.
Yikes.
I don't know why that sounds worse.
But it does.
But it does. On March 13th of 1919, a letter purporting to be from the Axeman was published in newspapers, saying that he would kill again at 15 minutes past midnight on the night of March 19th, but would spare the occupants of any place where a jazz band was playing. That night, all of New Orleans dance halls were filled to capacity, and professional and amateur bands played jazz at parties at hundreds of houses across town.
Yeah.
No one was murdered that night. I was going to leave the letter out. However,
no.
I have to look at Leah as I'm reading this letter.
I don't want you to, because that means there's going to be something.
You just have to see how this guy spoke. That's the reason that I'm reading it.
He's either eloquent or so uneducated that it's going to make
my
skin
crawl. He's not uneducated.
Okay.
That's good. It's the way in which he writes it. You'll see. So, first line. Hell, comma, March 13th, 1919. So he's writing this letter from hell. Oh. Esteemed mortal.
Oh.
That's how it's addressed. Esteemed mortal. They have never caught me, and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible, even as the ether that surrounds your earth. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleans and your foolish police call the Axeman. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I alone know whom they shall be. I shall leave no clue except my bloody axe, besmeared with blood and brains of he whom I have sent below to keep me company.
Blood and brains.
If you wish, you may tell the police to be careful not to rile me. Of course, I am a reasonable spirit. I take no offense at the way they have conducted their investigations in the past. In fact, they have been so utterly stupid as to not only amuse me, but his satanic majesty, Francis Joseph, etc. But tell them to beware. Let them not try to discover what I am. For it were better that they were never born than to incur the wrath of the Axeman. I don't think there is any need of such a warning, for I feel sure that the police will always dodge me as they have in the past. They are wise and know how to keep away from all of the harm. Undoubtedly, you Orleans think of me as a horrible murderer, which I am. But I could be much worse if you wanted to. If I wished, I could pay a visit to your city every night. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death. Now, to be exact, at 12:15, earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils in the nether regions that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. If everyone has a jazz band going, well, then so much the better for you people. No one thing is certain. That is that some of your people who do not jazz it out on that specific Tuesday night, if there be any, will get the axe. Well, as I am cold and crave the warmth of my native Tartarians, and it is about the time I'll leave your earthly home, I will cease my discourse, hoping that thou wilt publish this, that I may go well with thee. I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed. In fact, or realm of fantasy. Signed, the Axeman.
Well, that is just craziness.
I love how he has to put 12:15 earthly time.
Earthly time.
Just,
I mean, central.
and I'm sorry, but when you come in with esteemed mortals, all I think of is the Haunted Mansion, where he says foolish mortals every time. But yeah, esteemed. When you start out a letter with esteemed mortals, like, it's only got to go one way.
Oh my, that was something.
We'll go more into depth of the Axeman later, because there is a lot that goes along with him.
That was much.
Yeah, it's insane. So we will get to that at another time for sure.
That was much.
In keeping with the creepy, we got to touch on the cemeteries. The historic cemeteries of New Orleans are a group of 42 cemeteries that are historically and culturally significant. These are distinct from most cemeteries commonly located in the United States in that they are an amalgam of the French, Spanish, and Caribbean historical influences on the city of New Orleans, in addition to limitations resulting from the city's high water table. The cemeteries reflect the ethnic, religious, and socioeconomic heritage of the city itself, as well as the people buried below it. Well, above it. Architecturally, they are predominantly above ground tombs. Family tombs, civic association tombs, and wall vaults, often in neoclassical design and laid out in regular patterns similar to city streets. They are at times referred to colloquially as cities of the dead. And some of the historic cemeteries are tourist destinations.
Do you know, all I know about them is I've watched the originals, like the vampire show, The Originals, and they do a lot in the graveyards there.
Very cool.
Oh, I mean, and
they're gorgeous.
They're very pretty.
The main question is usually, why above ground? New Orleans is at or below sea level, depending on where you are, resulting in a high water table in the soil. If a body or coffin is placed in an in-ground tomb in New Orleans, there is a risk of it being waterlogged or even displaced from the ground. In addition to architectural aspects of New Orleans cemeteries, musical traditions have historically been part of laying the dead to rest in New Orleans. In the middle of the 19th century, New Orleans began to include pageantry as a part of unveiling their society tombs. Jazz funerals typically originate at a church and end with musical performances in the cemetery itself. The West African burial tradition of lamentations, culminating in joviality, was observed in New Orleans at funerals as early as 1819. By the time of emancipation from slavery, brass bands became commonplace at funerals in New Orleans. With the rise of associations for freed people in New Orleans, jazz funerals could be had for a suitable fee. Currently, in contemporary times, a lot of times there will be a very large jazz funeral that include men and women who have died tragically, at a young age, is when a lot of them, you'll see a lot of it. But jazz funeral, I hate to say, because it's because someone died, so I hate to be like that person, but one of the coolest things I've ever seen. I saw it in person, and it's amazing. It is a celebration of the person's because you're walking with the coffin, you're going to the cemetery. But it's
there was one in a James Bond movie.
Yeah, it's just so, they're so unique in that way. So I got to bring it down here.
Okay.
On August 29th of 2005.
This is the one that you're controlling yourself on, right?
No.
Okay.
New Orleans was almost wiped out by Hurricane Katrina.
Oh.
More than 80% of the city was flooded and over 1,800 people died.
That time is a fog to me.
Famous engineer Raymond B. Seed called it, quote, the worst engineering disaster in the world since Chernobyl. But there were supposed to be safeguards in place, right? There were, but they failed. The federal levee system failed, and there wasn't just one levee that failed. Over 50 failed, with the first 29 happening merely in just the first 24 hours. Just 29 in 24 hours. It's fine.
Can I tell you something? At that time, I worked at a catastrophe relief company.
Yes. How do you think Leah paid to go to Scotland?
Hey, absolutely. At that time, I worked at a call-out system or a call-out company where we sent out independent adjusters that went and worked for different insurance companies when catastrophes like hurricanes happened. And Hurricane Katrina happened. A bunch of hurricanes happened at one time, or in that season, but Katrina happened. And one of our directors had been to a conference before that hurricane season started, and he had been to a conference, and they talked about New Orleans, and they had said, if a Cat 2 or higher comes to New Orleans, it's going to be like a giant soup bowl if they don't get it fixed. If everything doesn't get fixed, it will be a giant soup bowl. And Katrina came, and it was a giant soup bowl.
Yes.
I mean, it was. I mean, it absolutely was. It was horrible. Guys, I don't know. I don't have any visions of the news like everybody does, because I was at the office calling people, getting people to towns to where they needed to be. Like, I worked overtime, and I'm not like saying I was a hero, because I was not at all. I'm not at all saying that or anything like that. We were so busy trying to, and we were getting packets together to get people where they needed to be and everything. I don't really remember, the news. People saying, they remembered seeing things on the news, and I didn't, because I was working. So it was a fog. But yes, I worked a lot at that time.
It was a lot. There were, I don't think that I specifically got into it here, because I kind of went, guys, I go on rabbit trails. It's the thing. I know. Well, I know. I looked up who Raymond B. Seed is, and found out all of his information on how he was, this majorly famous engineer, and how there was money set aside for years to fix the levees. It was set aside. There were programs and everything in place that were there to help,
that's ridiculous,
enforce the levies, and it just wasn't done.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I didn't have time to get into it, because it was too much information of stuff that I found super fascinating, but I'm sure a lot of people would find super boring.
I just don't understand how that doesn't get done when when
it's insane, just like how.
I mean, they told these people.
They knew.
Yeah,
they
knew that this was a risk. I mean, you're just like, we're in insurance now, and we tell these people these are the limits that you have to have. You're if you don't do this, you're just rolling the dice. You're just hoping that you don't get caught with your pants down, basically. Same thing. You're just hoping.
Which I put here that it kind of reminds me of the Titanic, and how even though they hit an iceberg, and I put in parentheses, or did they?
Oh gosh.
We don't have time to get into it today.
Stop it.
I've watched many things about the Titanic.
You've got to stop
Me and my boyfriend have watched so many things, but there's a whole thing that the Titanic did not go down because it did hit an iceberg. The iceberg had nothing to do with the Titanic going down. There was a fire. Anyways, it's a whole thing.
I'm canceling your YouTube subscription.
It's not mine, so you can't cancel it.
I'm canceling his.
You may not live. I may have to go find you an above ground tomb to go spend the rest of your non-living days in. Let me tell you, never seen anybody who likes YouTube that much. But everyone thought that it would be fine because there were safeguards in place. Like the ship's not going to go down.
It's unsinkable.
It's unsinkable. The unsinkable Molly Brown. Also, Kathy Bates. We will also talk about her in the next episode.
And in my acting class that I took during May term at Montevallo, I did a soliloquy from the play The Unsinkable Molly Brown. That was my final.
She's very... You gotta love Kathy Bates. Anyways.
You're welcome.
Hurricane Katrina was the iceberg. The levees were the unsinkable ship, and the residents were going down with the ship if they stayed. Residents were evacuated, and most went to shelter in Texas or northern Louisiana. A lot of them went to Mississippi.
They stayed in the dome. And it was bad.
Yeah, a lot of them who did stay, they took shelter in the dome. It was not. It was really bad. This is one of those things that I vividly remember is Hurricane Katrina.
And my brother-in-law he's a paramedic, fireman paramedic, and he was one of the people that went after the hurricane, and he went and was he went and they were looking for survivors and just kind of looking. Yeah, he saw a lot of stuff.
It's a lot.
We won't go into details.
No. The population of the city declined over 50% after the hurricane. Even today, which Leah's never been in this area, you can still see houses that were never returned to, or FEMA housing that served as temporary housing for someone, and the FEMA house is still there.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it in a minute. We'll talk about the area specifically that I'm talking about, but it is crazy. It's 2022, and you can still see houses that people just didn't come back to.
They couldn't afford to.
They couldn't. So,
or they didn't survive.
Right. And there are many that didn't have anywhere to go. Mm-hmm. These are the ones that you saw in the news. They were on their roofs of their homes looking for help as their house was completely submerged in water. Then there were the people who stayed for the good of the city itself. These were the people who knew essential services were going to be needed. We're talking about restaurant owners, gas station owners. Even though they had zero gas because everybody was seriously, there was I don't know if anybody understands what an evacuation looks like,
right.
But it is to quote Jillian Pensavalle from True Crime Obsessed, it's chaos down here, Tom. She's talking about in news things when they do. Right. She's like, it's chaos down here, Tom. It truly is. Every man for himself. It's like an apocalypse is going on. Everybody's getting gas. The lines to get gas are an hour long, maybe. And then when you get to the front, there may not be any gas. So
they're having kind of ration what you are
getting. And that you were getting $20 of gas, and the pump would shut off so that they could at least let other people get $20 worth of gas. Yeah. That. I mean, it's so crazy to think about. But these are people who were staying. They had gas stations and they knew that they had food and they had supplies. So they were staying. You had restaurant owners who stayed to help. And, a lot of other service businesses that were like them, they stayed because they were needed. I mean, they truly were. And that's amazing to me, honestly, is, again, to Titanic. Captain of the ship knows it's going down.
Yeah.
But he's still on the ship. It's just, people are garbage. Some people are not. These are bright spots in humanity that I see. We'll get to something else later. Anyways, but many people know the story of Zack Brown and Addie Hall. They met during Katrina and stayed to help others who stayed too. This is our second little tidbit of a true crime story. There is going to be a trigger warning in this portion. I will warn you before we get to it, and I will say I went ahead and told Leah what it was, so she knows ahead of time what part it's at.
Yes.
She knows that it's bad. So
and I appreciate the warning.
It just skip forward. I mean, at that point, you're not going to have to skip forward far. But just know, like, it's bad. It's real bad. So
You sounded like me.
it's real bad. So Zack and Addie, they met during Hurricane Katrina and they stayed to help the others who stayed too. They were the original Instacart, if you will. They delivered groceries on bikes to those who needed it. They cooked for their neighbors and even started like a kind of makeshift bar outside of their apartment for those who like wanted to get together to like be distracted. Because where they were, kind of the floodwaters had subsided at some point. So they had this like neighborhood, like little bitty makeshift bar where they like had liquor, they had everything, and they would like get people together, like to just take their minds off of things.
Yeah. And sometimes when you can get together, that makes things a little easier to handle.
Zack was an Iraq veteran, and Addie was a dancer and a poet. Unfortunately, the things they did to help Hurricane Katrina aren't the reasons that their names are remembered. The two eventually moved in together above a voodoo shop in the French Quarter. The voodoo shop, let me say now, has absolutely nothing, please hear me, absolutely nothing to do with what happens next. Absolutely nothing.
They just happen to live above it.
Yes.
As a lot of times there are living quarters above shops.
I will never speak against voodoo or hoodoo. I'm not messing around with that. 2, that is a cultural thing. Also not getting. Keep in mind, guys, this was an area that was like very heavily influenced by like the Caribbean and all of that, like Jamaica, like Haiti, everything around there. So like, look, just because a voodoo shop was there doesn't mean that it was bad. This has nothing to do with it. Just want to make that clear. People try to blame what happens next on that, and it had nothing to do with it. And I'll explain why. So I also kind of think that living above a voodoo shop is kind of super cool. Anyways, look, I'm real protected, if anything, because you know that voodoo store, they got everything around it, and nobody's messing with it because it's a voodoo shop. So, like, how could you couldn't be more safe above a voodoo shop if you really think about it. I mean, I'm just saying, think about the benefits, people. I can find a benefit. Give me a minute, and I'll work my way around it. Here's your trigger warning. Go ahead and skip forward a little bit. This apartment is where Zack strangled and dismembered Addie, leaving her body parts cooked in and on the oven and in the refrigerator.
I don't understand that.
That's kind of the worst part of it, guys. So like I said, it was just a couple of seconds. Zack himself took his money, spent it all on booze, drugs, and women before he went to a rooftop bar at a local hotel. This was a couple of years after Katrina. So the city's back. Everything's in full swing again. Like places are open. This is a time when like there were plenty of people there. This was not like he went to an abandoned building or anything like that. Just to like make that clear. He went to a rooftop bar at a local hotel, and he took one step off the roof for a direct line to the lobby. That's what I'll say. Officers found the confession letter in his pocket at the scene. And in it, he confessed everything that he did. That was when the police went to the apartment and saw everything that truly did happen. And he did confess to it. This is just a brief overview of what happened.
But do we know why?
This is what I put next, and this may speak more to some things. There is a much more tragic underlying story that includes drug use, PTSD from Iraq.
I thought that probably played a huge factor.
And a lot of domestic violence between both of them. We will eventually cover their stories in depth because there is a very weird thing where Addie had a friend that years later was also brutally murdered in a very similar way. It's very weird. Zack also had children. I mean, he had a previous wife and he had 2 kids, and it's just he came back from Iraq and truly fell apart. That is not at all, please hear me, not an excuse for what he did.
No, but that is not uncommon either.
No, I mean, it's unfortunate, but a lot of people have heard that story. So, like I said, moving on. I'm going to leave it there for now.
It's very sad. It's very, very sad.
Katrina wasn't the only threat in 2005, though. In September, Hurricane Rita hit the Gulf Coast. The city was still declared off limits to residents while it was being cleaned up. But the lower 9th Ward of the city was re-flooded once Rita made landfall. Once floodwaters were cleared out, the city was rebuilding, and close communities started to worry about gentrification changing the landscape of the city that they loved so much. For those who are not aware of because I know sometimes people say things, and I understand context clues, you can get it, but sometimes there are things that you may not exactly know what it is. And please understand, I don't think people are stupid or anything. I just want to make sure people are aware. So gentrification, right, in the traditional sense, is essentially when there is a community where people come in and they think they're doing a really good thing by updating the community and making it better and doing all of these things. But a lot of times what they can do is pull away the historical value of that community. So a lot of people were afraid that people were going to come in and they were going to take away the things of the city that they loved the most. So that was a big concern. There is gentrification discussed in other ways. That is not what I'm speaking to here. This is what they were talking about in this case. Thankfully, we've seen that this is not the case at all. The French Quarter, locally known as the Quarter, or I believe it's Ville Carré. Yep.
Don't ask me, ma'am.
Which was the colonial area city, and it is bounded by the Mississippi River, Rampart Street, and Rampart Street, Canal Street, and Esplanade Avenue. It contains popular hotels, bars, and nightclubs. Notable tourist attractions in the quarter include Bourbon Street, Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral, the French Market, and Preservation Hall. Also in the French Quarter is the Old New Orleans Mint, a former branch of the United States Mint, which now operates as a museum, and the Historic New Orleans Collection, a museum and research center housing art and artifacts relating to the history in the Gulf South. Just give me a minute. She's looking at me because she doesn't know where I'm going next.
You hesitated.
The city is most famously known for its music, food, the accent, festivals, celebrations, and most notably, Mardi Gras. And I put in all capital letters. Now chill out, Mobile, Alabama. I am getting to you right now. There is a major, and I cannot emphasize that enough, rivalry between Mobile, Alabama and New Orleans over the rights to Mardi Gras.
Who was first?
I have done the research. And if I say that, Leah knows I have done the research. And the first American Mardi Gras took place on March 3rd, 1699, when French explorers landed near present-day New Orleans, Louisiana. They held a small celebration and dubbed their landing spot Point du Mardi Gras. But the annual Carnival celebration in Mobile, Alabama is the oldest annual celebration of Mardi Gras in the United States, when it started in 1703. There's a 4-year difference, guys. Yes, the first Mardi Gras was in New Orleans, but the oldest annual Mardi Gras is in Mobile. Just
there you go. Clarification.
at the time, Mobile was the capital of French Louisiana, and the celebration began as a French Catholic tradition for all of our non-Southern listeners. Just a heads up.
Big deal.
Never tell someone in Mobile that they were not the originators of Mardi Gras. Hands will be thrown. They are serious about it.
Big deal.
And I just give them a moon pie and go on about your day.
Yes, they do throw moon pies.
Love a moon
in
pie.
Mobile,
I will
so
say.
I'm just saying that is kind of an upper hand there.
Just give them a moon pie, go on about your day. But never tell someone in Mobile that they did not start Mardi Gras, because it's a whole big thing. So they have the oldest annual Mardi Gras, but not the first one. So let's just make sure that that's very clear. Anywho, Carnival officially begins on the Feast of the Epiphany, also known in some Christian traditions as the 12th night of Christmas. Mardi Gras, French for Fat Tuesday, the final and grandest day of traditional Catholic festivities, is the last Tuesday before the Christian season of Lent, which commences on Ash Wednesday. Essentially, go on out, get drunk, because now we're settling in to Lent. We got Easter coming up, so we gotta
have all your fun.
We gotta
do all your things.
We gotta sweat out all the things before we go to church, to the Catholic church with the family.
You do all your all the things you indulge, because when you go to Lent, that's when you give up something. Correct. And so you are restraining or abstaining, or
correct,
that sort of thing. And so I'm not Catholic.
But yes, that's why Mardi Gras is strategically placed.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I'm sorry, I love you guys, but leave it to the Catholics to set aside an entire day to just get trashed.
Well, I mean, you don't
before
have to
you have to give
that day.
That's what
just
everybody
what
does.
It has morphed to.
Look. Throwing out beads, lifting up shirts. That's what the whole thing's about. I'm just saying. Speaking of, in 1721, the royal...
I was going to say, why are you looking at me and saying, speaking of, I ain't lifting my shirt.
You'll see. In
1720, no, I ain't lifting my shirt.
1721, the royal engineer Adrien de Pogger, I believe is how you say it, designed the city's street layout in New Orleans. He named the streets after French royal houses and Catholic saints. He paid homage to France's ruling family, the House of Bourbon, with the naming of Bourbon Street. Remember what I said? Lifting shirts, throwing beads. Told you, right here. New Orleans was given to the Spanish in 1763 following the 7 Years' War. The Great New Orleans Fire in 1788 destroyed 80% of the city's buildings. The Spanish rebuilt many of the damaged structures, which are still standing today. For this reason, Bourbon Street and the French Quarter display more Spanish than French influence. There was a move in the 1960s under District Attorney Jim Garrison, a.k.a. the Wet Blanket, to clean up Bourbon Street.
Wet blanket.
I mean, where's the lie? In August of 1962, 2 months after he was elected, Garrison began raiding adult entertainment establishments on Bourbon. He forced a dozen nightclubs to close, convicted of sex work and selling overpriced alcohol. Now, I'm on board with the second half. Selling overpriced, that's highway robbery. I'm just saying.
That's not nice.
I'm just saying. But following this campaign, Bourbon Street was populated by peep shows and sidewalk beer stands. Yep. When Mayor Moon Landrieu came into office in 1970, he focused on his efforts on stimulating tourism. He did so by making Bourbon Street a pedestrian mall to make it more inviting. The 1980s and 1990s were characterized by a Disneyfication of Bourbon Street. Critics of the rapid increase of souvenir shops and corporate ventures said that Bourbon Street had become Creole Disneyland.
What's wrong with that?
Because it's not what it is. Historically, noise violations were the responsibility of the individual making the noise. This is important. This changed in 1996 with Yoakum versus 615 Bourbon Street, which ruled that the property owner, not the noisemaker, is responsible for any noise violations. A 2010 city ordinance states that no music can be played in the French Quarter between 8 p.m. and 9 a.m. What? Needless to say, enforcement has been inconsistent.
Yeah.
And critics claim its goals are at best vague.
That's pretty ridiculous.
Some even say that the local law is unconstitutional. Most claim that the noise ordinances threaten the city's notable music culture.
Well, yeah, I mean,
100%.
That's pretty crazy.
Bourbon Street is the main tourist attraction of New Orleans and has over 17 million visitors annually. I put arguably 10 million of those are during Mardi Gras. Just kidding. Maybe. Y'all don't even know how many people flood to that city. Sorry, that was not a good way to say that. Flock. I realized as I said it.
No pun intended.
So sorry.
Oh, no.
So sorry for that.
I'm sorry if my cackling was too loud. That got me.
Can I tell you another really dark joke?
Oh, no.
I've always had dark humor.
It's part of the reason that we get along.
We know this. Leah has never been to New Orleans, as she said before.
I haven't, and I want to.
Cafe Du Monde. Very popular place. You get beignets.
The beignets.
That's where you get a cafe au lait, like chicory coffee. You live your best life. But
well, let's go there.
The floor, because of the beignets.
I bet it's sticky.
No. 100% all the time, no excuses, is covered in powdered sugar from beignets.
So is it crunchy?
No. But it's everywhere. I mean, everywhere. I had been to New Orleans before Hurricane Katrina. Long story. Anyways. My joke. Right. Keep in mind, guys, this was 2015, so I was like 14. My joke was, well, I mean, that was one way to get the floors clean.
Huh.
So people flocked to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. Like, it is so packed, people. You've never think of Times Square, not recently, but Times Square New Year's Eve. Like, that is how packed. Like, the cost to get a hotel to get anything there is astronomical.
Can I tell you something that made me upset? We went to Universal. We were on our trip, and we Ubered there. To Universal was like $25. No big deal. We could not reserve an Uber back. It wouldn't allow us to reserve. So we get an Uber when we're ready to go back. We're shutting the park down at 7 o'clock. It closes at 7 o'clock, by the way.
I know, it's very weird.
Very weird. $60.
See, guys, Leah doesn't use Uber, so Leah doesn't know about surge pricing. That's cheap.
That's ridiculous.
So there's surge pricing.
That's ridiculous.
Did you know that there's also a law in like the Disney World area that Ubers and taxis have to be so many feet apart from each other because of the taxi drivers? They hate Uber. Anyways, it's a whole thing. But yes, it's surge pricing. So,
but that's ridiculous.
It happens. It's been worse than that. I've caught it in Nashville at the wrong time. $170.
But
insane.
But what's crazy is other places you can reserve it, and you can reserve it for whatever price, but I couldn't reserve it at
it's surge
Universal.
No, you usually can't at somewhere like that where people are like a lot of people are getting out at one.
Yeah.
They won't let you reserve it.
That is ridiculous. Okay, so continue.
Happens all the time.
It made me very unhappy. It made my checkbook Nazi very unhappy.
Leah didn't understand this. Leah doesn't get surge pricing in Uber, but
No,
it's fine.
I get it. I don't like it.
Well, it happens. That's, I mean, it's fine.
It's not cool. It's not fun. It's not fun.
So I also cannot forget to include Jackson Square. Jackson Square is a historical park in the French Quarter of New Orleans. It was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1960 for its central role in the city's history as the site where in 1803 Louisiana was made United States territory pursuant to the Louisiana Purchase. In 2012, the American Planning Association designated Jackson Square as one of the great public spaces in the United States. I would agree, it's beautiful. If you think of photos of New Orleans, Jackson Square is typically the first photo that will come up. It is a large green space in the middle of the city with a massive statue in the middle of Andrew Jackson riding a horse. And then behind it sits one of the most beautiful churches I've ever seen in real life, which is the Cathedral Basilica of St. Louis, King of France, a.k.a. the St. Louis Cathedral. She comes up again, too.
That's where President Bush landed when Katrina happened.
Yes,
I mean, that's
the French Quarter.
Or that's where he.
So the Jackson Square. So Jackson Square quite literally is a square. If you were looking at Jackson Square at head on with the cathedral straight in front of you, Café du Monde is at the southeast corner, like literally the southeast corner of Jackson Square. It is so good. Anyways, you can also get your, just FYI for anybody who goes, you can get your beignets to go. There's a nice little stand to the side. Also, Café du Monde only takes cash. But unless you go to this little place on the side, I think, where you can get your beignets to go, you'll get them a lot quicker. You're never going to find a table. Just don't. But anyways, everybody's got to go. Beignets are the best.
I didn't mean he landed there. I meant he did his interview.
Right. Yeah, he did his.
That's what I meant. I did see that.
Okay. We're getting to our last.
This is the one.
In 2015, a Gallup survey determined that New Orleans was one of the largest cities in the South with the largest LGBTQ community. This is historically significant because of what happened to the upstairs lounge in 1973.
I was not born yet.
On June 24th of 1973, on the second floor of the building located at 604 Iberville Street, the upstairs lounge and its patrons became victims of an arson attack. Again, I will really try not to cry. I've explained before how I hate unjustified hate towards people for no reason. I don't care your background. I don't care your color. I appreciate your background and your color at the same time, but that makes no point to me in being hateful towards anyone, and it never should.
Yeah.
Events like this
are senseless.
And the events that happen after this senseless event will never make sense to me. If you do listen to True Crime Obsessed, they did cover a documentary, which is, I believe it's called Upstairs Inferno, I think is what the documentary is called. TCO covers it extremely well. True Crime Obsessed, they cover it very, very well. They cover it very in depth. If when we get to 1973, however many hundreds of episodes ahead of this there is, we'll get there. But if you want to go listen to the entire thing now, TCO has a fantastic episode on it. Like I said, I think I'll get to it in a second. I'll say what the name of the documentary is. I want to say it's Upstairs Inferno. But okay. 32 people died, and at least 15 were injured due to smoke inhalation or just the fire itself. The primary suspect was a man named Roger Dale Nunez. He was a gay man with a long history of psychiatric impairment, and he had been kicked out of the bar on the same day the arson occurred. There is a lot of speculation that while in the bar he identified as gay, outside of it he did not.
Okay.
So there is a lot of speculation, and you'll find out why I continue to say speculation, that he had internalized homophobia because of his upbringing,
Okay.
and he hated himself.
Okay.
If that roundabout makes sense.
Okay.
He could not accept himself, which made him hate other people who were gay, which makes no sense.
Okay. Okay.
You know what I mean?
It makes sense, but it doesn't make
Yes,
sense.
right. So that is why I say it is hate. Like it truly, it's just, anyways. He was never officially charged, but based on the investigation and the events that followed, it was most likely that he was the culprit. They have proof of him going into multiple stores and gathering equipment to make a Molotov cocktail, to set the building on fire. They have proof of all of this. Just a bit of a trigger warning here. No one would ever officially find out, though, because Nunez completed suicide in November of the next year, because he knew he was kind of on the police radar for it. The official cause of the fire is listed as undetermined origin. While this did occur at a bar known to cater to the LGBT community at the time, there has never been any evidence that it was caused by hatred or overt homophobia. However, based on all of the information that has been gathered since, it is highly likely. But based on police reports, also keep in mind this was in 1973. So just, we'll get to that part in a moment as well. So, all right, where was I? Lost it. Oh, on the day of the arson, the bar was having its regular beer bust drink special. I don't know what it is, but it sounds like a fun time. And with the Pride celebration that weekend, the bar was particularly packed. Stonewall happened 4 years before this. So the Stonewall riots, which created Pride Week because of the riots at the Stonewall bar. So all of this was only 4 years after like the Stonewall riots and all of that occurred.
Okay.
So that is why there was, so some people might not think that there was a Pride like that wouldn't be a thing, but Stonewall was before this,
Okay.
which created this. So just kind of a timeline. So the bar was particularly packed that day. I mean, it's New Orleans Pride Week. I mean, what are you going to expect? I was just saying. At 7:56 p.m., a buzzer from the downstairs sounded, and bartender Buddy Rasmussen, an Air Force veteran, asked Luther Boggs to answer the door, anticipating a taxi cab driver. Boggs opened the door to find the front staircase engulfed in flames, along with the smell of lighter fluid. Rasmussen immediately led 20 patrons out of the back exit to the roof where they could access a neighboring building's roof and climb down. Others saw the floor-to-ceiling window. Guys, if you don't want to hear detail, like, I can't not include this part just because I feel like it's a disgrace to people's memories to not include this, but I'll warn you, not a triggery warning as such as bloody, like, things like that, but it personally hurt my heart. So others saw the floor-to-ceiling windows as the easiest way out, despite the fact that there were safety bars on the windows.
Oh, no.
With a 14-inch gap between them to prevent dancers from breaking through the glass. Several people managed to squeeze through them, some still burning when they reached the ground below.
Oh.
Luther Boggs, who keep in mind was the one who originally went downstairs to open the door, was one who came through the window in flames after pushing his female friend through the gap so that she could survive. Just, yeah. The flames on Boggs were extinguished by the owners of a neighboring bar, but he died on the 10th of July, 16 days later, from third-degree burns to 50% of his body.
Oh, gosh.
Reverend Bill Larson of the Metropolitan Community Church, which was a pro-LGBT Protestant denomination in the area, which I also found very fascinating for 1973,
Yeah.
but good for you. He removed an air conditioning unit from the bottom of one floor-to-ceiling window and was attempting to get out. Trigger warning, guys, I'm really sorry. He was attempting to get out when the upper pane of glass fell on top of him,
Oh, no.
pinning him to the window frame, half in the building and half out. His charred remains would be visible to onlookers for hours afterward, recorded in many pictures taken of the front of the building in the aftermath of the 16-minute fire. Do not Google this event, period, unless you want this photo to come up.
I mean, they took this picture.
A lot of people didn't. It was reporters that were there because it was a 16-minute fire, and it was one of those things that reporters were there and they were taking photos, and there was so much going on, and then when they looked back at the photos later, they could see him.
Ugh.
They exist, and I have seen them. Do not
No,
Google
thank
this
you.
if you don't want to see it. So
No, thank you.
just to be aware. The assistant pastor, George Mitchell, managed to escape, but returned in an attempt. Really going to try to not get upset. I'm already tearing up. Anyways, I'm going to pull myself together. But he returned in an attempt to rescue his partner. They considered themselves married based on a civil ceremony that they had 2 years previously. His partner was Louis Horace Broussard. Both died in the fire, and their remains were found holding each other.
Wow.
He got out. He was out. Like, and you you put yourself back to get the person you love. I don't care what sex you like. That's.
I wonder how the other one couldn't get out. Like how come they? I mean,
they go into it later. When he came back in, the way that he came back in ended up being something had fallen, and they were trapped.
Wow.
So
That's wow.
that was the part that as I was like, guys, y'all have no clue how hard I was trying not to crash just a second ago. It's so heartbreaking to me. And then what happens next continues. Mitchell's children. So Mitchell was the assistant pastor of this church who went back in to get his partner. Mitchell's children were visiting from out of town and watched the same movie 7 times as they waited for their father's return.
Oh, no. So they had no clue what was going on.
Eventually, a friend took them to the airport and sent them home to their mother without telling them what happened to their father and his partner.
Oh, no. They had no clue?
Mm-mm. No. Remember how I said people are trash? Many churches refused to hold funerals for any of the dead.
Oh.
On July 1st, at a Unitarian church in St. Mark's United Methodist Church, headed by Louisiana's Methodist Bishop Finis Crutchfield, fun name, and the Metropolitan Community Church founder, which this was the church the two who died in the fire, Reverend Bill Larson with the window, and then Mitch and his partner. This was the founder of the church, because there were different places in the U.S., like a lot of different churches are. He was the founder. His name was Reverend Troy Perry, and he came from Los Angeles to participate. there were riots going on outside of the church as the funerals were going on.
Oh my gosh.
And people were attacked as they were walking in. And one reason they picked this church was because there was a side exit to the church that was not accessible by the public. Keep in mind at this time, guys, like, you could truly get fired from your job for being gay.
Yeah.
You could, like, it in some places it was like illegal. Like, this was not, and a lot of the people who were friends with some of the victims were not publicly gay. Like, they were closeted, as some people would say. And they did not want their faces shown. So they entered through the side of the building so people didn't know that they were there. Which is just sad because they were afraid that people in the news were going to see them and they were going to be on the news, or their photo was going to be taken and they were going to be in the paper. And so they were scared. So they went in the side entrance to the building. But when they left, a demonstration of new willingness to be identified on camera occurred. And a majority of the congregation walked out the front of the church with all the rioters, with all the reporters, with all the cameras. Because a lot of them said, I didn't want to be a coward for my friend. Like, you're some kind of hot garbage if you protest a funeral, period.
That's ridiculous. Whether or not you agree with the way somebody lives their life,
it has nothing to do with you.
Has nothing to do with you. And guess what? They're dead. Let the people who loved them and who are mourning them mourn. Mind your business.
Like, and the fact that churches in the area, like, they tried, because it took them several days to come together with funeral arrangements for people. And churches were like, they're gay. We're not. Like, people knew that this was a gay bar. It was which I love too, which got me. Like I said, there's a lot more to this story and we'll get to it at another time. But it was a piano bar after a certain time, and they would come in and everybody would play the piano and sing together. And it was just like a fun place for people to get together to be themselves. And like, what's more, like, regardless of what you believe in, like, what's more beautiful than just like people getting together to be themselves? Like, I'm weird, guys. I'm real weird. And like, it's nice to be.
She really is weird.
It's nice to be able to be yourself, and not have to be someone else in front of people. But I loved when they said that they had it turned into a piano bar after a certain time at night.
I would really love that.
I loved that.
I love to sit around and sing.
There are several in New Orleans. So
one of the best things in the world when we went to Disney. Look, I am still flying high on Disney. This whole week has just been a crash to reality. I don't know why I'm not with my fellow princesses still. I'm having to work like a commoner, and it's just been a real shock to my system. But we did the Frozen sing-along. Guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's nothing better than like a good piano.
Like just singing with people.
I mean, so good. Anyways.
Especially when you sing like a princess like Kayla and me.
Right. So back to the garbage.
Here's the deal. You don't have to agree with somebody, but respect them as a person. And you know what?
Not even if somebody's dead. But
they're a person.
The addition to that is just what is so infuriating, that you would think it is okay to protest someone's funeral.
That makes me angry. Or, I mean, and here, I might make people angry, and I'm sorry if I make you angry. I am truly sorry if I make you angry. I go to a Baptist church, so we would not have a same-sex marriage at my church because it's a Baptist church, and that goes against the teachings of our
It's
church.
not a Presbyterian or anything
Right.
like that.
And that's just
Right.
it. I mean, that's just where it is. However, there are people who I go to church with who have family members who are homosexual, you know, and if they were
They're a part of the LGBT community.
yes,
Mhm.
if they were to pass away, I don't think that they would refuse to have the funeral
No,
there.
I don't.
You know, that's just not that's
Mm-mm.
not how that's not how Christianity works. You know, you love others. That's the teaching.
It's not how humanity
It's not how humanity
works.
should work. That's not how
Yeah.
Christianity should work. Because those churches, they were wrong for saying, no, well, you sinned, because that's what their premise was. That's what they were saying. That's what their premise was.
Okay, Pastor Bob, you never sinned a day in your life.
Exactly. And that's what I was getting at. It was
Pastor Bob, who's 50 pounds overweight. I'm sorry, sir. Gluttony is a sin.
exactly, and that's exactly what I was getting at.
I mean,
it's not right. It's not right, and that makes me angry. You can't pick and choose. That's not right, and that makes me very angry.
It's frustrating.
It's wrong, and and rioting and picketing and you know what good's it gonna do you?
Nothing.
I mean,
nothing.
They're already gone. What good does that do?
I mean, like, and do you feel good going to bed at night?
Right.
Like, do you feel good about yourself? Like, you feel like that you did that day contributed somehow to society?
You know, okay, I want you to come stand in front of my preschool class that I was talking about, that I was teaching about segregation, and explain to them what you did, and have them, explain to them what you did and see their reaction. Their reaction will tell you if what you did was right or not.
It's just, it's crazy. Well, and this part got me too, because a lot of the people some of the people who did pass away they did die. Some of the people who did pass away during the fire were not out as far as their family was concerned.
Oh, no.
So several families never stepped forward to claim the bodies of their family members.
They wouldn't claim them?
No.
Oh, no. Now, see, there's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who are part of that community, and I claim them, and I love them, because you know what? I love people.
It's just, that's your...
That's your friend. That's your family. And
yeah, and we'll get more into it in a bit. But a few anonymous individuals stepped forward and paid for the 3 unknown men's burials. They were buried.
That is heartbreaking.
Yeah, they were buried with another victim who was identified as Ferris LeBlanc in a mass grave at Holt Cemetery. LeBlanc's family would not learn of his death in the arson attack until January of 2015.
Oh, my.
In 2018, Robert L. Camina, director of the Upstairs Inferno documentary, so yes, it is called Upstairs Inferno, announced in The Advocate that after extensive research, one of the 3 unknown victims could finally be identified as 32-year-old Larry Norman Frost. Camina noted in the documentary, quote, "I was shocked at the disproportionate reaction by the city government. The city declared days of mourning for victims of other mass tragedies in the city. It shocked me that despite the magnitude of the fire, it was largely ignored." So it wasn't even in no one's mind. It wasn't even a thing.
It wasn't the right community.
No. And which is why I said at the beginning of this that
and I say that sarcastically.
Right. It's amazing to me, like at the beginning of this little section, that like by 2015, Gallup poll said this was one of the most accepting places for the LGBT community to be, which just like made my heart happy, because like, I mean, like I said, the ability to be yourself in any sense in the word, and I know this very well, the ability to be yourself is very freeing in any regard.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm very aware of that due to things in my life, but the ability to do that is very freeing. And for people to be able to have a safe space to do that is wonderful. So I was just very happy that, I mean, while this did happen in 1973, yes, it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I was happy to see that it's definitely turned or made a complete 180.
Well, and I will say, I mean, and not even sexuality wise, just being yourself, period. I mean, you know, I am 42 years old now, and I will say that with age, I sound like a, you know, wise and old lady now, but as I have gotten older, I am more comfortable in my own skin. You know, I, I mean, I've always been outspoken. But I am more likely to advocate for myself as well as others. I've always advocated for others more than myself, but I will speak up for myself more now than I used to. If I feel like something's not right for me, I'll speak up more now, more than I used to, and I'm more comfortable. You know,
because you get to a point in your life where you realize that it really doesn't matter what other people think.
Absolutely.
I mean, like,
absolutely.
The best thing that I ever heard was someone's opinion of you is none of your business.
Absolutely. And once you realize that, you're like,
hey,
hot diggity.
I mean, it's just, anyways.
Yeah, I mean, and that's absolutely right though. And once you realize that, and the most powerful word you can ever say is no.
Yes. Yes is incorrect.
But I mean, really, once you realize that you can say no, and it's okay to say no,
and set boundaries.
Yeah. And once you realize that you can do that, and it's okay to do that, and it's healthy. It's healthy to say no. You don't always have to say yes. And if somebody's upset with you, it's okay.
What we're saying is that Leah and I are going to start a spinoff podcast where we just give you unsolicited advice.
Well, but really, because that's when you really learn how to be yourself, though, and learn that, you know what, I don't have to do what everybody wants me to do. I can do what I mean, you know, within reason. Like, don't do illegal stuff. Murder is still bad.
Yeah, we know. But yeah.
Love people, be kind, murder's bad.
Yes.
I mean, live by those three rules.
So we'll wrap it up. We're already into that. Now you see why this is a 2-part episode, guys. So this is the last section. The largest of the city's music festivals is the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Music Festival, which is commonly referred to as Jazz Fest. Other major festivals include Southern Decadence, the French Quarter Festival, and the Tennessee Williams New Orleans Literary Festival. The American playwright lived and wrote in New Orleans early in his career and set his play, Streetcar Named Desire, there. In 2002, Louisiana began offering tax incentives for the film and television production industry. This has resulted in a sustainable increase in activity and brought the nickname Hollywood South for New Orleans. Films produced in and around the area include Ray, Runaway Jury, The Pelican Brief, fantastic movie, Glory Road, All the King's Men, Deja Vu, also fantastic, Last Holiday, also fantastic, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, 12 Years a Slave, fantastic.
Benjamin Button kind of creeped me out.
It's creepy. That's why I didn't say fantastic.
Creepy.
And Project Power. New Orleans professional sports teams include the 2009 Super Bowl champs, the New Orleans Saints, and the New Orleans Pelicans, who are their NBA team. It is also home to the Big Easy Roller Girls, an all-female flat track roller derby team.
Don't mess with those girls.
Not these either. And the New Orleans Blaze, a women's football team.
Do not mess with those girls.
Much like our episode in Chicago, there is an entire Wikipedia page for notable people from New Orleans. So here are just a few, and by a few, I mean a lot. We have writers who include Truman Capote and William Faulkner, Levi Spear Parmley, who was the inventor of dental floss,
Oh.
Al Copeland, the creator of Popeye's Chicken, Ruth Fertel, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
My husband says Popeyes, by the way.
Popeyes.
Can't stand how he says it.
We have
I love you, Michael.
We have Chef Leah Chase. She was known as the queen of Creole cuisine.
Ooh, I like it.
We have Silvestro Caro, a.k.a. Silver Dollar Sam.
Oh.
He was an Italian-American mob boss of the New Orleans crime family.
Cool.
Just want to put in here, he died on June 26th. It was 21 years before I was born, but there is an important question. Am I a mob boss reincarnated?
You're going to make me an offer I can't refuse.
You'll be sleeping with the fishes. I'm going to give you some cement shoes and you can walk off the end of a pier. Tell you, I make a good mob boss. Anyway.
You are kind of scary sometimes.
True. We then have Sandra Bullock.
Love her.
She still lives there.
Her dad lives in Birmingham.
Mm-hmm. Anthony Mackie, who is the Falcon. Tyler Perry, Reese Witherspoon, Hoda Kotb. It is Kotb for anybody who's ever wondered how to say her last name. For music, we have Louis Armstrong. We have Brian Christopher Williams, who goes by the stage name Birdman. I'll continue. Harry Connick Jr.
I love him. Love him.
DJ Khaled, Fats Domino, and last but not least.
Uh-oh.
I've got to wrap up this episode with my personal favorite notable figure from New Orleans.
Oh, dear.
This will surprise some people and others not surprise them at all. His name is Dwayne Michael Carter Jr., a.k.a. Lil Weezy, Weezy F Baby, but you might know him as Lil Wayne. When I tell you guys how obsessed I am, this obsession knows no bounds. I love him. Love him. He's amazing. There's this thing, and I didn't put this in here, but anyways, you can find it. He did an interview somewhere. I know this is running long, whatever. This is an amazing story. You'll love it. He grew up in like a really bad area of New Orleans. And when he was very, 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 very young, he was shot. Well, like by someone passing by, like a mob mob, like a gang shooting nearby. And he was shot when he was very, very young. Someone asked him in an interview, how do you feel about the current state of the racial environment? Someone asked him that question. Guys, it shouldn't be a shock. Lil Wayne's black. So he goes to tell this story. And it's one of the most beautiful stories that I've ever heard by anyone that explains stuff so well. And he explained that when he was younger, he was shot. And that everyone around him wasn't doing anything. And someone ran up to him and started yelling at people to go call 911 and to go do this and to go do that, and immediately was holding him together to stop him from bleeding. And he ends up in the ambulance headed to the hospital. He didn't have anyone with him. Keep in mind, he is very young. And he looks beside him and there's this police officer.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's in the hospital and he's been sewed up and everything. And he looks over and the nurse walks in and looks at him. And guys, there's the exact story out there, but this is pretty much what I remember. And asks him if there's any family with him.
Mm-hmm.
And the police officer steps forward and says, I'm his Uncle Bob.
Wow.
And he knew him from that day forward. And at the end of the interview, he says, I don't know anything about racism or black or white, but I know a good MFer named Uncle Bob. And I was like, ugh,
Wow.
like through my heart. Because the way he tells it is just, because he's so like sly and he's so just the way that he talks. I mean,
yeah. I mean, and that's exactly
it was beautiful. But he, I mean, like for those who don't know, he was signed when he was only 12.
Yeah, he was little.
By Birdman, who I mentioned earlier. Birdman's amazing. He is regarded as one of the most influential hip hop artists of his generation and often cited as one of the greatest rappers of all time. The Carter 3 is the best album of all time. You can never convince me otherwise. Ever. If anybody knows Lil Wayne, you know that the number one way in 2009 to figure out if your car had good bass was to play a Millie. It still is today, and I'm just saying, it's one you either go hard or you don't. Lil Wayne has some of the best lines in music that I've ever heard, such as, life is a beach, I'm just playing in the sand. Come on.
I'm sorry.
I mean, he's amazing. He says, I'm on a paper trail. I didn't even write this down. He says, I'm on a paper trail and it ain't no telling where it took me. And I ain't a killer, but don't push me. Yes. Amazing. I mean, anyways, he has many lines that are just, oh, you hear him and it just gets you. And I'm like, dang, that was good. Anyways.
I think George Strait's a pretty good lyricist.
I mean, it's fine. Anyways, Lil Wayne's amazing. He's done a lot of things. He's written like all of his albums. He's written like, so there's the Carter 3, there's the Carter 4, there's all these albums. There's like this rumor out there.
This is where a generational gap is showing.
There's a rumor out there that he's written through like the Carter 20. I mean, it's insane. He has, I want to meet him one day. His wife, I may leave my boyfriend for her. She is gorgeous. She's a plus size model, and I want to say she's Puerto Rican. Or Dominican. She's one of the two. So sorry if I got that wrong. I know that that's not a good thing to do. She's one of the two. I looked at who he was married to, and I was like, oh, who is she? Clicked on her photo, and I went, oh, ma'am. Ma'am. I don't know if I'm having feelings. She's gorgeous.
Having feelings.
She's gorgeous.
What is
oh
this
my
feeling
God.
so sudden and new?
I mean, amazing.
And on that note,
one day you'll find Lil Wayne on our website saying how much he loves us. But until then, you can go find it and all ONUC information you're looking for. If anybody wants a special podcast just on Lil Wayne, let me know. I'll do it. We are One Nation Under Crime on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and at ONUC Pod on Twitter. If you love our podcast as much as we do, and we know you do, please follow us, recommend us to your friends, family, coworkers, strangers on the street,
people you meet in line at Disney. I did that.
Get people to roll down their window and like when you're in traffic and just yell at them across. It's fine. And then go leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast.
Yes.
We do have a Patreon. We are going to record an episode for it tonight, along with everything else. It's fine. So.
Surprise!
Go to our Patreon. You can find it by searching for One Nation Under Crime. We appreciate you guys listening to this week's extended episode of One Nation Under Crime. Just wait till we make it to next week. We get to talk about Nicolas Cage and ghosts.
Yay!
So we will see you here. Same time, but
same crime
next week. And remember, there isn't always liberty and justice for all.
Nope.
Unless you love Lil Wayne. So we'll see you here next week, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.